one of the main things I see is the record keeping not being conducted the way it should be. So he asked me to have this meeting. I said it'd be great to avenue to educate people on what the record keeping requirements are. It kind of reminded me of doing this. I got some kids, and they're a little older now, but about 10 years ago there was an animated cartoon, because that's the same thing there, came out called Monster Inc. And there was this annoying lady, it was like in this booth in the factory they worked at, and she kept on just saying, you got to do your paperwork. You got to do your paperwork. That's about the only thing she said. So I kind of feel like that sometimes. Keeping records for your CAFO permit. This will touch on both the general state and the general permitted ones. If you have any questions through any of this, just stop me and see if I can answer them. Why keep records? I know it feels like it's a worthless thing to do sometimes, keeping records. One guy asked me here this morning, he goes, for every inspection you do, how much paperwork will you have? I said, for every inspection I have about 30 hours of paperwork. So I know what paperwork is, and it does take time, but it is necessary. One of the things it does is helps ensure protection of human health and the environment. How does keeping paperwork help the environment? If you're doing your paperwork and actually looking at the things you need to look at, those in turn will help you catch things quicker, hopefully help you catch things quicker to where you can fix them or they don't become an issue. You're more responsive to deficiencies. What I'm getting at on that is one of the record keepings we'll get into is write down your deficiencies. If you write it down, you're more apt to fix them quicker instead of just having one of those things that it happens and you kind of put it off. If you write it down, you're more apt. Documentation of self-inspections. It shows us that you're out there and you are looking at your facility and you are documenting those issues that you see. It's required by the permit laws and regulations. In your permit, it spells out what records that you need to keep on there. On the flip side, well, if I don't keep records, you have the increased potential for environmental and health impacts. I'll put up there the possible increased liability in lawsuits. You know, the department used to be the ones that some people feared because we have the issues of penalties and stuff like that. But really, the lawsuits is the ones that have the issues. You know, you have these nuisance lawsuits. We have facilities now that try to build, and they'll have 2-year-long lawsuits because people don't want you to build on there. And one thing they do, our records are open to the public. So one thing these oppositions do, they look at, has the facility been in compliance? So they look at all this stuff, and they present that to the judge, jury, or whatever, and to show if you've been in compliance. So that's a big factor on these lawsuits, on those. So if they have record-keeping issues time and time again, that comes up in these. Increased inspection frequency. Every year, I kind of figure out what facilities I go to. And one of the things I look at is, well, what's the length of time between the inspections? Have they been submitting their paperwork on time and consistently? And if you haven't been submitting your paperwork, you get moved up on the list. So if you want to see me more frequently, just don't do your paperwork. But violation of permit laws and regulation and possible penalties. Just on paperwork penalties, we don't like doing that, but we have in the past. If we're out there time and time again and still you haven't had the paperwork completed, we have went after penalties on those. Increase the potential to find issues. One of the record keeping requirements is to do a walk around the barn every week and document that. I went to this site here. If you can see here, you got a path from this riser out. This guy, he subcontracted out his production end of it, so he was only responsible for the lagoon issue. And so he never went around the back of this. So I got a call from a neighbor, the creek's full. So I'll go out there, yes it was. I go out there and ask him, when was the last time he'd been around the barn? Oh, I don't know, 2 months ago. So if he was out there checking that every week like it's required in the paperwork, he would have caught that earlier and it probably wouldn't have been an issue. There's two forms of records to maintain. One is an annual report, and the other is the CAFO record-keeping forms. Annual report is required to be submitted to your regional office or to the state office. I think the requirement is to the state office in Jefferson City by February 15th for the information the previous year. And the annual report, if you're a GS facility, and most of you are, general state permit, the only thing that is required is this front page here. And it would take you probably 10 or 15 minutes to complete. It's fairly simple. You got up here, you just have general information, your name, where you're at. You have about 6 questions here, like how many hogs you have on site or how many beef you have on site with the animals you can find. How many gallons did you pump last year? So I'd ask you just a few questions on that. Did you have a discharge? Yes, no, sign it and send it in. If you have a GO permit, then it does ask you your land application information, parts 5 through 7. If you just have a GS, don't fill the second sheet out, because this is just for the GO permits up here. We still have a lot of people that have the GS that's filling out the back sheet, but really you don't have to. The big part of our record keeping is the CAFO record keeping forms. And these are to be conducted daily in some circumstances and recorded weekly or recorded daily. We'll kind of get into each one of those. You keep these for 5 years on site and be available if we come to an inspection. You don't submit these to us every year. Just when we come there, you pull out your folder or whatever, your 3-ring binder, and show it to us. The permit requirements on a GS and also GO, these are no discharge systems. So you can't have an unauthorized discharge that gets to waters of the state or off property. If you do have one, you are required to notify us within 24 hours after you become aware of it. First thing you need to do is stop the discharge. Put a dam up in your creek or whatever, stop the discharge, and then give us a call on that. As far as record keepings, you are required to keep those records of the discharge if you have one. Hopefully you'll never have one. But if you do, you need to fill out the date, the time, cause of discharge, location, discharge rate. These have on here what gallons per second. If you use different gallons per minute or whatever, write it on there. We're not that particular on that, but just let me know what it is. The duration here it has in seconds, use minutes, just write it on there. And then your estimated volume for the entire discharge. If you have a discharge, we will be out there on site making sure it's cleaned up, and we'll go through this with you. But hopefully you'll never have one of these. This here is your weekly records of your depth of your processed wastewater and liquid impoundments. And these are report the liquid levels feet below the emergency overflow or to the top of your pit. So if you have 3 pits or if you have a pit and a lagoon, you're going to need one for each one on these. So if you have a lagoon, you're going to need that every week. If you have a deep pit, you need that every week on here. And we need that from the top where it's going out. I know JBS at one time they was saying they want it recorded 12 inches down because that's your safety volume. So if you're starting to measure from here down, put on here plus 12 inches or something like that. Just note it on top so when we come out and look, we know where you're at on your levels. Here are records where CAFOs generate manure, litter, processed wastewater that is sold or given away. This is transferred off-site or onto property that you don't have control of the crops. So on this, we need the source, and that would be like your lagoon deep pit type. Again, it would be that date of transfer, when you did that, the amount transferred, info to buyer. So what they need is the manure analysis, that's the test results. They need that annual manure analysis that you're required to take, and a copy of the nutrient management technical standards. The nutrient management technical standards has like setback distances. They're not required to follow them, but you are required to give them a copy of that. The name of the buyer and the address of the buyer. And I'll get into why this is important later on this transfer. It kind of breaks the ties of your responsibility for it. This is records of precipitation for each day. So you have January, and you got on the records 1 through however many days in each month. So on this, we need, if it's 0, you don't got to write 0 every day. But on the days you get precipitation, this would be snow, sleet, rain, anything. Put how much you received on that. And this is only required for open liquid manure storages only. So if you have deep pits, or if you have a slurry tank that's covered, you don't need to do this. But if you have a lagoon or something that catches precipitation, that's what we need on this. And you can use nearby weather station information, but you need to keep that data with you. If we come out, do the inspection, look for precipitation, and you say I use a weather station data, we need to see that on there. This is record keeping requirements for method of mortality management. The only thing we really need to know on this is which one do you use, composting, rendering, landfill, incineration. And we don't need, some people will put on how many mortalities they have. We don't actually need that. We just need the method of mortality management on there. We know you have the records that, JBS requires you have on mortalities, and if we need that, we can look at it. This is record keeping requirements for, this is your testing results. Your manure analysis needs to be done every year. So annually, you got to have those from each discrete area. So if you have a pit and a lagoon, we're going to need one from each one of those. You don't have to keep them written on each here. Most of you get the analysis. If you just want to staple that to there, that's good enough. It has all that information. If you want to write it back on these forms, that's fine, but you just have to have that information there on site. So every year, and we usually like this done when you're pumping. So if you're pumping out of a deep pit or lagoon while you're pumping land applying, you got it agitated, you're pulling your samples. That gives you a better sample, more uniform. You just reach into your deep pit. Without that, then you're getting more of the top layer. This is records for your soil analysis. So once every 5 years, you're required to do soil analysis on the fields that's in your nutrient management plan. These are the fields you have control of. You have control of the crops. So once every 5 years, you're required to do your soil samples, and that's based upon your nutrient management plan. That each field is independent for these soil analysis. And again, you'll get your analysis back. If you just want to staple them together and keep them with it, that's fine, or you can put them back up on here. You got record keeping requirements. These are your dailies or your weekly walks around your site. This is, you're walking around the back of your barn. You're doing weekly inspection of best management practices, that you're looking for any stormwater runoff into your facility. This would be your deep pit or lagoon. Is everything worked in to control the stormwater runoff away from my facility? You're doing daily inspections of your water lines. These are the water lines that have the potential to break, cooling, drinking water lines that have the potential to break and fill up your pit or to flow into your lagoon. And these have to be conducted daily but recorded weekly on this. Then you got weekly inspections of your mortality in your mortality or your byproducts impoundments. This would be your deep pit itself or your lagoon, walk around it. This is each day you do this. It'll be for week 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. You got your stormwater, water lines, manure containment structure. Just date and initial that. Like your water lines are daily but recorded weekly. We just want to have, you know, on February 4th I did those and have your initial on them. This is one of the more important areas. Like this is if you'd have a deep pit system, you're walking around it. You know, my foundation's good. I don't have any cracks in those, any waste coming out of that. But my barn, this is one I went to, the tin is eroded or rusted off, and stormwater was flowing from the barn into the deep pit. So that's a deficiency you need to correct. You're getting stormwater flowing directly into your deep pit, which you're just wasting money applying more, you know, more manure, more waste than you have to. So that's something you're looking at on these walk-arounds. You're looking at, do I have an area where stormwater's running off the roof and getting into my vent cover? This guy, he had pumps from a vent cover on the deep pit and, you know, just leaves them open. So that's something you're looking for. Excuse me. Walk around your lagoons. Is this lagoon, the stormwater being diverted? This is a lagoon that wasn't being diverted away. You know, he's fixing the area. He's regrading the stormwater diversion and pushing the stormwater away from the lagoon. Walk around the lagoon. Do you see any seeps from your lagoon berms? This is an area that did have a seep in here at the toe of a berm. You know, are you checking that out? Are you going to fix those? Again, walk around the lagoon berms. One, the level's too high. You're getting overflow coming over from this cell over to here. So that's something you're walking around on your weeklies and what you're finding out on your facility. You know, your mortality management. What does your mortality management look like? Is it being upkept? Is your mortalities covered? And also walk around your bin, just general conditions. How about feed spills under your bins? We don't have any specific regulations about feed spills, but it does cause issues. We've had issues where, well, one of the worst ones I've been to where somebody dumped out a whole truckload into a river, killed off a good section of the river. Corn can kill fish. Had one truck wreck where DDGs from an ethanol plant, and they have killed off a pond below that. It takes out the oxygen in the water. Here's your record keeping requirements for land application. Every time that you land apply, you need to keep these records, and this would be for yourself and also for your contract applicator. And what you're looking at is you're looking at your land application equipment. Are you doing leak inspections on that? Are you monitoring the perimeter of the fields while you're land applying? Are you looking for drifting of spray and checking above ground irrigation lines hourly? So this is when you're doing your land application, or if you hire a contract applicator, somebody has to do that. So if they're doing it, you need to make them aware of it and have them doing it, or you do it yourself. On the land application, about 90% of our issues that we have with discharges come from problems with land application. So this would be, you know, over applying runoff, you got pipes rupturing, you got, you know, tanks overturning, you got a lot of different issues that can happen on that. So we really need to have enhanced, you know, oversight of land applications. All land application records must be maintained and readily available for inspection, even if it's conducted by a contract applicator. Again, the permittee is responsible for discharges from land application area. We've been seeing more and more issues with the contract applicators going out, and not they're doing a bad job, they're just not keeping the records, and the permittees thinking they are, but most of them are not. But it is the permittee's responsibility to ensure that they are being done. And if a contract applicator does have a spill off of your site, you are responsible as a permittee. Land application area is agricultural land which is under your control, that you have control of. You have, it's either rented or leased that you have control, and this would be on your nutrient management plan on the land application areas. If manure, litter, anything is sold and is not under the land application area, it should be considered a transfer. And that was one of the first record-keeping forms we looked at. If the manure is, if you do it as a transfer, the permittee is not responsible. So if it's transferred to another neighbor, whatever, you have the records on that, and they have a spill with it, it breaks the ties, you're not responsible. If you don't have that paperwork that shows it breaks the tie, you still can be responsible for it. I said about 90% of our issues that we find are from land application areas, from runoff, not observing, not checking the perimeter of the field. This one here went to see if it was coming across the road culvert into the creek there. I went out there, the guy was actually monitoring. He was sitting there in the vehicle on top of the field, but he was land applying on top of the field. It was just running off the sides down to the creek. But when you monitor, you need to be monitoring the places, where the water is going to run off to. So you need to be monitoring, the ditches, the low areas, not just the top of the field and watching it run. This here, we had one, the guy was, turn on the traveling gun, but didn't go out and check, went through a field tile riser. This is record-keeping requirements for deficiencies. Like I said earlier, if you write down the deficiency, you're more apt to correct them quicker. So this would be your inspection date, deficiencies noted, date of repair, and corrective action taken. And on these, I've seen people fill out every time they had a nipple water leaking. We don't want every issue that you have. We want the bigger issues that causes problems. You got a windstorm that comes through, takes off 2/3 of your roof. We want to see that on there. You have a water line break that put in, 30,000 gallons into your deep pit. We want to see that. We want the bigger issues on the deficiencies and what you did to correct them. If you had a, plug between your barn and your lagoon, it didn't get anywhere, but you fixed that. Those are the things we want to see on the deficiency noted. This is more record-keeping requirements on the land application areas. Might be easier to just show you on here. This is one of the land application records that we have. This here is your source manure. Again, that'd be a lagoon, deep pit, field ID. And these need to be correlated to your nutrient management plan. If your nutrient management plan has field 8 or field F or whatever, it needs to be in line with that. Date of application, the weather, rainfall, and soil conditions. What we're looking there, one of the requirements, you shouldn't land apply within 24 hours of a rainfall event. So that being marked on there. At the bottom of this form, there is some different things on how to fill out the weather, rainfall, soil conditions. What we're looking at in the soil conditions, we don't want frozen or saturated on there. We want dry or partially dry on there. Application method, this would be a traveling gun injection. The rate. And then we get into the basis of nutrient or phosphorus application or your pan application. Receiving acres, how many acres total did you land apply, and then the total gallons. And I'll kind of touch on the N&P here in a little bit. We have more on the record-keeping requirement, expected and actual crop yields, and then more on the total nitrogen and phosphorus. When you really get into these nutrient management plans, it's based, your application rates is based upon your soil conditions. You have your type of crop planted and what your uptake for that plant and soils will do. So what you're looking at, and all this should be in your nutrient management plan on what your application rates should be based upon your manure analysis and your soil analysis. So on here we need your field ID, total acres, planned crops. So if your planned crops was corn or soybeans, planned in requirements. If your in requirement was 150 pounds per acre, we need that on there, or 100 pounds, whatever it is. This is your manure pan, what you're actually applied, other end sources, and total pan. So what we're looking there is if you put on 100 pounds of in off your manure and then you put another 50 pounds of commercial fertilizer on, that added together, and then what your total in application was. Your actual crop. So this is your planned crop, this is your actual yields, and then you got your in surplus and deficiencies on here. So all that should be calculated and should help. The nutrient management plan should help you figure all this out on that. If you need help on there, if you put on, let's say you put on 150 pounds of in for corn and think you're going to have 150 bushels of corn, but you only ended up having 80 bushels of corn, you're going to have a plus in deficit on here because you didn't have as much crop uptake of the in that you put on. So all that needs to be calculated on that. This is for nitrogen summary. Most of your fields in northern part of Missouri, you're going to be applying for the in. When you get down southern part and you're using more poultry waste, you're going to be looking at your phosphorus summary here. And that should be part of your nutrient management plan when you really get into it and take a look at it on if you're applying to your nitrogen or your phosphorus. In your nutrient management plan, you'll have fields with a P index, and you'll have high, moderate, or low. If they're a high, you should be applying on your phosphorus limitation. If they're a moderate or low, you should be applying on your nitrogen. How many of you have really taken a look at your nutrient management plan to really go through it and see what fields, what's your limiting factor on each field, on your phosphorus, and also is something we look at, are you applying the rates based upon that nutrient management plan? So when we come out and do an inspection, we'll look at your application rates, look at your nutrient management plan, and see if they match up. Some of the things we look at on an inspection, a couple other things we'll look at when we come out here. Do you have a current copy of the nutrient management or Missouri State Operating Permit on site? Is that on site? And we'll usually try to go over with that, with the permittee on that. Have a current nutrient management plan on site. And a lot of these nutrient management plans are based upon the soil analysis, so they're good for every 5 years. So if you did your soil analysis in 2010, this spring you're going to do another set of soil samples and redo the nutrient management plan. Some consultants I have seen has been writing these for like 3 years or 2 years or something like that, some odd numbers. You need to look at your nutrient management plan and make sure it is current and that it is applicable for the time period that you're in. I went to one here 3 weeks ago. It was written in 2013. They used soil data from 2010, so he needs to do one this spring because his soil analysis was done in 2010. They need to be done every 5 years to correlate with the nutrient management plan. So he spent money on the nutrient management plan for 2 years of data. And they are high to have done. Export-only facilities must maintain the current permit application Form W on site. If you're a facility that is an export-only facility, you don't have any ground that you land apply on your own, and you're export-only, the application form is your nutrient management plan. If you look on the back of your application form, it will state on there, if you're an export-only facility, you need to keep this on hand. Again, nutrient management plans must be updated on a routine basis and coincide with your soil analysis. Another permit requirement that we'll run into is your nutrient management technical standards. The permit references the nutrient management technical standards. In that, it has several things you need to look at. One is setback distances. How far from a property line can you land apply? Does anybody know offhand? So when you land apply, you're 50 feet from property boundaries. It's on that. And it has setbacks from streams. It has setbacks from wells on there. So that's something you need to look at. If we get a concern, most of the time we're out there on land application issues, it's a neighbor calling, or somebody drives by, is here and they're too close to the stream or they're too close to the road, and we'll go out there and measure to make sure, are you meeting their setback distances on those. No surface applications within 24 hours of a planned event, application event. So are you making sure that you're checking the weather and you not having a thunderstorm? I've been to some sites where they've had fish kills. A rainstorm was getting ready to come through, so they hurried up and land applied more. I think that's something we don't want to see because that just pushes everything off to the creek. Manure will not be applied to slopes greater than 20%. If it's greater than 20%, you're probably not going to want to be on it with a tractor because that's getting pretty steep. Manure will not be surface applied on frozen, snow-covered, or saturated ground. This says surface application. This would be like a toolbar traveling under center pivot. If you're injecting this, you can inject on frozen or snow-covered ground. Saturated soils are kind of iffy on that. I've seen people, with snow-covered ground inject. Seems like it does a pretty good job, and that's okay to do. It's not against the regulation because it does have surface application on there. The nutrient management technical standards, the second part. If you are seeing issues with infiltration, it's not absorbing quick, adjust your application rates. Irrigation systems must have an automatic shut-off at the pump in case, the Murphy switch is on there, in case you have a loss of pressure, too high a pressure, usually shuts off either side, or you have an operator sitting there at the pump where you can radio them and have them shut it off. All land application equipment should be calibrated annually. And this is how we do it on inspections. We just have a rain gauge we stick in the ground, run over top of it, well, not over top of it, or to the side. See if it is applying what it should be. If you're thinking you're putting out 1/4 inch per acre, you pass over it one time and you're getting 1/2 inch, that's not calibrated correctly. You need to be in the realm of reasoning in there. The perimeter of the fields should be checked regularly during the application. Make sure it's not runoff. That was another record-keeping form we had back there. These are your setbacks distances in the nutrient management technical standards. Drinking water wells, 300 feet on here. Public roads, property boundaries, 50 feet. It goes through a whole list of them. So when you do land apply, and again, this is contract applicators, if they're applying on your fields, they're required to follow this too. Permit requirements, some other things that's in there that I see some issues with. The stockpiling has changed a couple of years ago on the regulations. Stockpiling, this would be dry manure, your compost. If it's in the protection area, it's not allowed anymore unless it's covered. And temporary stockpiling of solid manures at the land application site should be no more than 2 weeks unless it is covered on that. That's something that's changed about 2 or 3 years ago. The liquid level in the storage structures should be lowered on a routine basis prior to the winter wet season. So when you're going into winter, you need to make sure that your lagoon or deep pits are down to an area that you can make it through the winter. I go to some sites and you go on there in November and they got 12 inches in the lagoon. Kind of makes you sweat going through winter where you may not have time to land apply, and then you get spring, then you have a lot of issues. Did some helpful reminders on here. Like I tell people when I go out doing an inspection, pick a day every week to do your paperwork. It could be a Monday, Friday, Sunday, whatever, and just get in the habit of filling those records out. It don't take very long. Walk around the facility one time, write it down. Keep the records in a binder or folder. You know, get you a 3-week binder or folder, mark it 2015, 2016, and keep all the records in there. Then keep that binder for that 5 years. You know, you'll go to one, they'll have a record, you know, in their truck and one on the wall, and they get scattered around, they get hard to find. Keep records for 5 years. One of the requirements is to have records available upon request. So you need to keep them near the site or at the site. Keep a copy of the permit and nutrient management plan with your records. And keep records safe from mice, fire, and water. We'll go to, you know, the offices in there. They'll have some papers scattered around. Pull open a drawer, and there'll be a mouse nest in there. They use that for their bedding, the paperwork. So keep it to where it is usable. Keep it safe. And it does help if you use forms provided by the department. It's not a requirement, but if you use the forms, it makes it easier on us. And if you use the forms that we have, it ensures that you have everything that you need, that you're not missing things. I know a lot of the nutrient management plans you have, your consultant will have their own forms on the back. You can use them, but make sure that it has everything on them. But I would be helpful just to use the forms that we provide. Now the forms can be found on our websites. I have them both on here. And the annual form, our annual report for 2015 is due February 15th. So if you don't have that completed yet and set in, you need to do that. Then the CAFO record keeping form is on here. I have a bunch of cards up here. If you want me to send you some, just grab a card and call me or email me on that. If you ever need any help on understanding what your permit has, understanding your nutrient management plan, how to fill out the records, give me a call. I mean, I'd like to have people call me, and I'll come out there, help them through it. I could help you through the phone on things, but give me a call. I mean, I've had several calls every year on, you know, what do they want here? How do you fill this out? I'll go through that. I'll come to your place if you're in my region, 30 counties in the Northeast, and I go through the forms with you.